Welcome yet to another episode of Blocks and Barriers with me, Tracy, the health coach. Today, I'm very excited. We have a special guest. We have Ivy Sheila Atieno. Ivy is a prosecution counsel and advocate of the High Court of Kenya, specializing in human rights, peace building, and criminal justice. With a strong background in both legal practice and program management, Ivy excels in handling high-pressure cases and complex projects related to human rights and public policy. Ivy's work extends to conflict resolution, disaster management, and community empowerment, where she ensures alignment with donor guidelines and strategic objectives. On today's episode, Ivy will share her insights on balancing the demands of a criminal law career with personal well-being and what has worked for her in maintaining health while navigating the intense pressures of the legal field in Kenya. So I'm so excited. Welcome, Ivy.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Such an amazing introduction.
Really?
Thank you for the hype.
I was just going to ask you, I hope it was, there's a long list. Your bio alone, just like so many of my guests, your bio alone can be an episode. So congratulations on all your achievements.
Thank you for the hype. Thank you. Thank you. Validation. Thanks.
You're welcome. I must give you your flowers, you know.
Mm.
So let's start with an icebreaker. So you've obviously been in court many times. So what's your biggest pet peeve in the courtroom?
Is the fact that you're not in control of what happens. So starting from once you're in the courtroom, you're at the mercy of the judicial officer. So everything is you pray that things go your way. Again, even for us people, for prosecutors, we are not in custody of the police file. So how you handle your case that day, you don't know how it stands, you don't know how it's going to end because you're at the mercy of also of the police. And if they don't deliver, in court, you show that you're not delivering, which is an issue that I had. So I'll say organization is one thing. And also, again, fighting my fears was the biggest issue. So let me just take it back.
Yeah.
I never really wanted to litigate. But you know, when this role came up as a prosecutor, you have no choice, but you have to go to court. But at least now, what I'm doing right now, I don't have to go to court anymore. So my first pet peeve was overcoming it was fear actually of public speaking and also not fumbling on your thought process of how you interpret the law, and also if you're quoting the right sections of the law. That was one fear I had to overcome for myself because public speaking is not easy, and also being firm with your arguments, because also depending on your adversary, they can really be, of course, more advanced than you and can really rip you apart in terms of your self-confidence. So that was one issue I had to overcome, and I'm happy I did that because you find your voice with litigation. And then also the type of judicial officer you deal with is also an issue. You may get a good one, you may get a very harsh one, you also may get somebody who's very accommodative, who like, okay, I understand where you're going with this, but I think you'll approach from this direction. So some will also teach you on the job, which again, for lawyers, you always learn on the job, especially if you litigate. So yeah, it was, it's an interesting experience, I'll say that. But those were my three issues that I had.
Okay.
And of course, dealing with witnesses in terms of when they're on the witness stand, how they're going to present their evidence, because you're not in control of what they're going to say, but in your head, you know what it is you want to bring out of them. So you can't control that. So that's another issue that my peeves that I had, those four to be specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I guess you've met so many people, you've interacted with different people, and sometimes we can get wisdom from interesting places, interesting people. So I'm just wondering, what's the best thing someone has said during your time in court?
We deal with very many, I'll use the word stakeholders, because
Mhm.
you deal with not only now fellow lawyers, judicial officers, you're dealing with prisoners now, we call them accused persons, police officers, probation, I said children officers,
Yes.
also the civil society organizations. So and then again, you're dealing with the common wananchi, which are now the backbone of basically the criminal justice system.
Mhm.
So I think for me, it's a matter of honestly how you interact with somebody, because how you even just talk to somebody really matters to them, which is something at least I've gotten a very good feedback in terms of my interaction with people, that I'm not rude. I'm actually, how will I say, I don't say polite, but I'm very forthcoming. You know, I'm approachable. That's the word. I'm very approachable, and I'll actually take the time to listen to you. So that is one thing I was happy about, and also where it's a case that I really you're passionate about, and I will go above and beyond to at least feel that I have delivered justice to that person. So I always believe that I'll always make somebody feel good about themselves in terms of, yeah, she's a good prosecutor. I like talking to her, and she actually heard me, even though maybe I didn't get the answer that I wanted, but she actually took the time to listen to what I had to say. So I believe that one I've nailed it.
And so, with your
Uh,
approachable self, has
mm.
someone said something that has made you think, this is so good or so funny or whatever?
Yeah, because for honestly being in public service for now as people, you're basically you're giving back to the community, the common wananchi, and it's something that you have to realize it's a selfless decision that you're embarking on. And for me, when somebody says that they're happy to interact and they're like, no, I want to talk to her because even though she's handling my case, she understands where I'm coming from. I feel like I'm also doing my job, and also as a lawyer, what do we say, officers of the court. So I'm also doing my part to actually give back to community. So I'm actually happy with what I am doing in terms of my role in executing in terms of civic basic education, and also just uplifting somebody in terms of access to justice. So I am doing my part in terms of constitutionalism, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've
Mm.
mentioned it's a job that's almost selfless. So what inspired you to choose criminal law?
Honestly, criminal law was something never in my radars.
Uh-huh.
Funny enough, my passion has always been environmental law, but entering environmental law, I was in it for a bit, but I think being in that space has been difficult for me to be retained in that space. But predominantly in terms of my working experience, I've always been just leaned towards human rights. I don't know why, but God has decided this is the path you must follow. So yeah, so I know for criminal law and human rights, they're together.
Mhm.
It's just because now for criminal law, you're convicting somebody or somebody will be acquitted. So the basically is a criminal record. But also when you're going through the process, there's some human rights that have to be adhered to throughout. Also basic rights based on the constitution have to be adhered to. So they're in tandem. So I didn't really choose criminal law. It just chose me over COVID time. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it's been an eye opener for me, honestly.
Yeah. Good.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned before how, there's so many things out of your control, how the witness will present themselves, whether police present what they need to present timely. So I can, or rather, I'm wondering, how was your first day in court with all these things? And plus, you mentioned, how someone, the opposing counsel, I don't know what you guys call them, can rip you apart. So, how was your first day in court?
So, wow. The first time, now when I went to my first working station, it's in Meru County. Um, First it was a culture shock because, born and raised in Nairobi, then you're thrown now into the rural parts. It was a culture shock because there's sorts of many crazy cases that you see. And for me, when I remember I was doing a defense hearing and I chewed a blackout.
Mm.
Yeah, so luckily one of my colleagues, now she's in Kitui. So she was basically, she was, how do you say, she was monitoring what I was doing the first week. Because prior to us now being thrown to your workstation, we were shadowing our colleagues. I know it's shadowing, you can just sit and watch, but until when you're on your feet, it's very different because you're the one now who is thinking, what am I meant to do at this
Yeah.
moment in time? And people need to realize for prosecutors, it's always easier to present your case. But the hardest part comes to now when when you're attacking the defense. Because that's when now the true prosecution really comes out, how you're going to attack the defense side. So I chewed a blackout.
Wow.
And yeah, I chewed a blackout because now it was my time to cross-exam. And you're told, state, can you cross-exam? I just, I just, I couldn't think of anything. So now when my colleagues started, I was like, oh yeah, I meant to ask this. And it was a very petty case of assault. But you see, I chewed a blackout. I guess because also at that time, I was now facing my fears of I need to start talking. I'm
Yeah.
addressing a whole court.
Mhm.
Where do I start? Which part of the defense side do I start attacking from? So I just didn't know where to start. So after when I had her now cross-examining, then now questions just started coming to me. So I was telling her, okay, just ask this, ask ABCD. So the first time it was not good because I fumbled.
Mhm.
I just hit a blackout. But it happens to many of us. That's the thing. Also now there's the disorganization because now you're like, you are taught how to maybe identify an exhibit,
Yeah.
but you see how we were taught was more or less maybe how the Americans did it. But now when you're in the Kenyan system,
Yes.
depending on your JO, there's a way how you have to present it. So even me, that part, I hit a blackout. And I was told, no, Ivy, this is how you're meant to identify your exhibit. So you have to identify it as, marked as PMFI1, like that, things like that, like the basic things
Mhm.
I was taught. I just hit a blackout. I just saw black.
Mhm.
But and then another thing was in terms of thinking quickly on what it is that you want was another issue that I had. So my first day alone was not good. So we always say as prosecutors in your beginning, you're always thrown into the deep end for you to figure everything out for you. So basically I had my colleague there
Mhm.
and she was like, no, just say this. Or even now my magistrate at that time, she's like, no, okay, here, just say ABCD, but also there's a way how when you treat somebody, they can be too firm.
Mhm.
And sometimes that also really belittles even your own confidence, your own self-doubt, and also your level of intellect that you know that you have, but at the same time, you sort of doubt yourself. So I went through that. Day one, I went through all of that.
Yeah. And so the blackout, it wasn't that you literally dropped out. It's just your mind went blank and you just, but you came to
Yeah, I
yourself.
just
Yeah.
saw black and I'm like, okay, where do I start?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know the worst thing for me, it was, I remember it was a sister-in-law and brother-in-law. The brother-in-law beat the sister-in-law until just sustained some soft tissue injuries, but then became such a big family issue.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, this case is so petty, but you see, for them, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
to the point now. And then again, there was an advocate at that moment, and he's a very old guy. But I'm like, okay, how do I attack this? The adversary, how do I attack his case? Because I was
Yeah.
like, maybe you know it, but where do I start? That
Yeah.
was like, what do I ask? Where do I
Yeah.
start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you got over it, and at least there was a support system, including the magistrate. So, and you learned from these things.
Yeah, so one thing, even what she told me was, for when you start prosecuting, at least for the first 3 months, which is everyone says it, for the first 3 months, you're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But also it depends who you go before. So there are some who are very nonchalant. They will not correct you. They'll just put you down. But others will be like, no, counsel, I think this is what you're meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So my, how do I say, my character development
Yeah.
it was very tough. It was not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a lot under her. Maybe just
Yeah.
her way of delivery was very tough, and the
Mm-hmm.
days get very defeated.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Her and also my colleagues, I learned a lot. So
Yeah.
you always, every day you always learn something new, and you also have to create the time to literally do your research in terms of what elements are you proving for this offense, those things. When you're preparing for your cases, you have to create time to actually go through the court files, the police files, so that what questions to ask, and then how to bring your elements out faster. Which something it takes you time for you to bring them out faster. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was there. They say before you get a mile, you have to walk before you run. It's
Yes.
just basically that.
It's part of the process, yeah. So for those who are not familiar with the legal system in Kenya, maybe give us just a brief overview of how criminal law works there.
Yeah, so how do we say, they always say for when how how our cases begin. So
Yeah.
some say it starts at the police station, others say it starts at our office.
Mhm.
So I'll just say the moment somebody reports a complaint, which can either be civil or criminal, because torts the states are wrong, it can be civil or criminal. So it falls on the criminals spectrum. Of course, now the police have to carry the investigations because that's their mandate. So upon carrying the investigations, and then witnesses also, write their witness statements, they have to visit the scene, secure the scene. If there's any physical evidence, they have to obtain the evidence and also preserve the evidence. Then now the files are brought. So now they create a police file, which is now then brought to us. So now for our office, it's our job, or rather our mandate to, go through the investigations, okay, the complaints, the nature of the complaints and the offense that has been proposed. Then go through the entire file in terms of the witness statements, if there are any exhibits, documents in terms of if it's medical, if it's bank records, the likes. If there's any physical evidence, how was it obtained? Has it been preserved properly? And then based on the evidence, we have to look at there's some three issues we have to prove on our side now to charge the person with the criminal evidence, which is normally the evidence threshold, there's the public interest, and then now there's just the threshold. So basically where there's some evidence, but we need more evidence to corroborate what is already there.
Mhm.
Public interest, I think we know something that it will affect the public at large. But the criminal crime is always the evidential issue because we're not a court of the public opinion. We
No.
go before the court of law.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once we feel that there's sufficient evidence, then it is our office, the ODPP, that now our job is to now charge the person.
Okay.
However, if there's no sufficient evidence, we always give reasons as to why and what the police needs to do in order for us to charge the person.
Okay.
So it's not a very straightforward thing, which you guys just assume, yeah, we have reported the case. Sorry, Kiswahili, we have reported the
It's
case.
okay.
They've done the investigation, we put in the file, and then we must just prosecute. It's never that straight and arrow. There's so many things we have to look into, so that also, if we're moving forward with the case where there's enough evidence, so now it's always the prosecution that always starts the case. So after we close our case, it's now for the judicial officer to actually decide whether the defense can be put on the stand to state their case, or for based on the evidence that we have presented, it is insufficient, meaning the case will be acquitted. And for that acquittal, which is under Section 210 of our CPC, the Criminal Procedure Code, it's not a good thing because it shows poor investigations were done and also exposes our office for malicious prosecution, which is not, now that's a civil suit, which is not good at all.
Mhm.
Yeah, so those are things we really look into and people don't really understand. So maybe
Yeah.
where cases, maybe we have gone before court, and as we're going and the evidence is not so much, you're just forced to withdraw. So also to avoid such situations from happening. Because again, government, and we rely on government revenue, and there's no allocation for funds for paying off people who have actually sued us successfully for malicious prosecution. That also really hurts us and also you as a prosecutor. I know it also, in a way, it also taints your image.
Okay.
Mm.
And how cooperative do you find the police in the scenarios where you explained there's not enough evidence, this is what you can do to maybe look for evidence? How cooperative are they in doing that? Because we have a reputation of how Kenyan police are. So I'm just curious, how cooperative are they?
I'll say this.
Yeah.
I've dealt with, so police officers, you have to be very firm. And that is something that I was told day one of reporting to in my first workstation, is that in public service, one, there's no friendship,
Mhm.
and two, you just have to be firm. And for us, for our role, our office, historically, it was the police who actually used to prosecute people. Until now, our constitution came and now created our office, because the prosecution office originally was under the docket of the AGs, but they used to only handle murder and appeal matters more often than not. But the bulk of the cases used to be handled by the police. So once this constitution came in 2010, that already became our, because now we've stripped them off what they used to do. So we took that power away from them, and then it became ours. And also now we added qualifications. You have to have your LLB, you have to be an advocate of Kenya. Then now there's some years of experience post admission that you have to have undertaken. And with that, there's a way how you deal, especially the police officers. They can be they're not easy to deal with, to be honest. And you
Mhm.
see, for me, I'm a female now, I'm in my 30s.
Mhm.
It's even harder because you're just that girl, that small girl. Who are you to talk to me? Especially an officer who is older than you. Who are you
Yeah.
to talk to me like that?
Mhm.
So you really have to be firm in terms of standing your ground. And
Yeah.
the best way I've realized to go about it, as you stand your ground, as you cite the reasons why,
Mhm.
always cite your legal provisions and always cite any case authority. Now, basically, previous decisions that have been upheld by, high courts, court of appeal, Supreme Courts, for them to actually understand where you're coming from. So it's not easy, to be
Yeah.
honest. But also on the flip side, I've dealt with very good police officers who
Okay.
actually listen and they're like, okay, here, I didn't look at it this way, but you've told me this, I've learned something new. So I'll go
Okay.
and tell my colleagues. Yeah. So it's a there
It
are two
can go
extremes.
both
Those who do
ways.
not want to listen to you,
Yes. Yeah.
but then there are those who be like, okay, yeah, I've heard you, I've understood you. I'll go and now. Normally they have to tell the OCS.
Okay.
I'll go and tell the OCS or even the in charge of crime, or officer of commanding station for people.
Yes.
Yeah, so for them to also, each one teach one.
Yes.
So there are two extremes. There are those who
Yes.
listen, there are those who do not want to listen, but you have to be very firm.
Fine.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you can make one wrong move for them. They could also maybe pushing an agenda or just, lack of, you don't want to understand, those who just thrive on ignorance. Yeah,
Mm.
I brought a case. Can you send that, church it? It just goes. And you're like,
Mm.
no, here, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Mhm.
So I know you mentioned before, sometimes we may not understand the processes that go on in the system. So what are some common misconceptions that people have about criminal law in Kenya?
I'll start by saying one. People we work on very extremely thin resources, to be
Mm.
honest. If I
Mhm.
can talk about my first workstation, which I cannot, it
Yes.
was a hardship. So there's so much that every day you're waking up and people are coming to your office, and it can be a witness, a victim, somebody on the other side, the accused, and they expect you to give them an answer.
Mm.
And the answer they expect you to give them, according to them, must favor what it is they want from you and also from the court, which is something, honestly, in life, you cannot always please somebody.
Mm.
And guys need to understand that the law is there for a reason. The law will not always cater to what it is that you want. And that is something people don't realize. Also, the criminal justice system, it is there. Not everything caters for the victim or even just for the accused person. So that is something, honestly, it's very difficult to make somebody understand. It does not cater to what it is that you want. It is there.
Yeah.
I cannot do anything about it.
Yeah.
So they always feel like the world, basically, their world is resting on your shoulders.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm also a human being.
Yeah.
Where can this world that is resting on my shoulders also rest on whose shoulders? Which for us, it's always back to the court.
Mm.
That is one issue. Another issue is that our job is not for the faint-hearted, to be honest. Um, People will just think what we do it's very straightforward. Honestly, it is not. And you're always putting out a fire, even when you're in court. Before you're entering in court, you're already putting out a fire. And the moment you're even going to court, the fires just always keep increasing. And it's something I never understood it until I was in that position. So it really eats into your own you as a being, because if you don't check yourself on a regular basis, you end up being something that you're not.
Mm.
Maybe if you're a bubbly person, you end up becoming very angry,
Mhm.
which is just not the situation, should not be, but it happens. And I used to wonder, like, why maybe my colleagues, there's a way they'll talk to you in an intonation. I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Until one day, okay, not one day, several times, I've done it. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, maybe we need to check ourselves, take a step back, check yourself. Another thing is that if you don't have how do I say, an organizational system that caters to you, because I realized like all my colleagues, every person has their way, how they go about, how they run their court. So if you're disorganized, trust me, in court, it will reflect how you're very disorganized. And if you're
Mhm.
disorganized in court, it affects the amount of time you're going to be in court, which also affects the judicial officers' time in court, which affects their time into writing judgments and rulings. So you have to come up with a system that actually works for you and stick by that system, and also make people who work with you, I always believe with you, because they help you with your cases, need to understand this is my system. we have to just go with this flow. If not, you're going to make me look bad, which is something I was always very familiar in my last station. When you're very, I won't use the word incompetent, when you fail to do your job, it always reflects back to me. So when it gets back to me when I'm in court, I'm always going to be told that I am disorganized. Can you put your house in order?
Yeah.
It's never good.
Mm.
So that's another issue with in terms of our jobs, those three issues. And then also having a very good relationship management is something that is very important. Yes, people have their negative opinions about police officers, but I'll also say this, I've also interacted with police officers who are very, very good. So
Yeah.
I've dealt with some crazy ones, but also I've also dealt with some really nice ones.
Yeah.
Really, really nice ones. And also for me, um, as much as they take directions from our office, there's also a way how you have to be, yes, you have to be firm, but also you have to show a level of respect.
Mm.
Not even, I don't say courtesy, it's
Mm.
more respect to them. So that also they feel that whatever you tell them, they don't take it badly, which is something when I was leaving my last work, so they're like, okay, for you, by the time you're going to sign a charge sheet, we actually feel we have done our job. But when
Yeah.
you said, hey, it's wrong, you actually take your time to correct us. So there's that way where they feel like even though you're criticizing what they're doing, they'll always want to help you
Yeah.
for them to also do better,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then people also need to understand that for our job, let's say I don't know you
Mhm.
and they know you're a prosecutor in this court, they're handling a matter. And if somebody maybe has a sort of interest, people always try to figure a way how to poke into your personal life. That's something, it's not for the
Mhm.
faint-hearted. So
Mhm.
you really need to figure a way how to make sure, honestly, your work life is your work life. And also
Yeah.
how you conduct yourself, you always have to try to do it as professionally as you can.
Mhm.
And separate that with your private life completely, because guys will always try to nitpick into your business, which is
Yeah.
something I don't like it because you
Mhm.
don't catch a breath.
Yeah.
So people need to understand. Then again, there's the whole pressure that comes with the job. It can be, I can't say much, but a lot of pressures can come in also how you handle some very sensitive cases, which
Yeah.
it tampers with you as a legal practitioner,
Mhm.
and also tampers with your level of, I'll say, security to some extent.
Based on the cases you've encountered, like, what do you believe are some of the underlying reasons that will drive someone not just to crime, but from the first crime to be a serial offender?
Yeah, I'll start with the easiest, honestly. Where I was in Meru, honestly, I'll start with socioeconomic status. If you come from
Mm.
poverty,
Mm.
and it's always the young
Yeah.
boys for some reason. It was always boys, I realized, very young, even from teenagehood.
Mhm.
They let's start with stealing a phone,
Mhm.
maize cobs, a bunch of mira, and just because of money. Maybe they
Yeah.
come from a very poor family,
Mhm.
which is unfortunate. Another flip side is that also level of education. There are those who
Mhm.
actually come from families that have are paying for maybe their son's education,
Mhm.
and they just do not want to go to school.
Mm.
Because of now, okay, what I realized about where I was is that their culture is that maybe once you're circumcised,
Mhm.
they feel now for men, it is their right that their fathers meant to, give them land. And maybe if it's to build, to farm, to utilize that land basically to what they want. So for them, they're like, okay, me, I've been circumcised, I'm now a man. My father is meant must give me that land. I start my life. So they don't care about school. They're like, I want my father's land, I want to start. Or even not to the point you actually force your dad to give you land, which now for Meru County, everything came down to mostly things dealing with land. Land is very vile there. But again, I realize it's also driven by a lot of their culture. So also culture barriers is also a very big issue in terms of why guys also commit crime. Others also, I think, is maybe what they experienced as a child also affects them much later. There's some cases I've read with sexual gender-based violence. Ay, 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 ay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one I dealt with, he was a very notorious pedophile, basically. Yeah, and so not one, there were quite a number of victims. Basically, for him, I didn't like what he did to people. Boys were below the age of 10. However, if you flip it to his side, what if also he was sodomized at that age?
Yeah.
So those are things also I feel for our side in the criminal justice system, we have not addressed those issues because I was reading South African cases whereby those are guy who actually had sexually basically he had raped. So for us we call it defilement because if you're a minor you're defiled. But then now when you're an adult it's more or less rape. So he raped defiled 3 girls between they were 6, 7, and 11, and they were sisters. Yeah. So yes, he was convicted. He was sentenced. For each girl, it was 10 years. So everything came to 30 years. But he appealed based on just he wanted a linear sentence, and he called actually a counseling psychologist who had a very firm background in child development cases concerning divorce, child abuse, and all of those things. And she did a very critical analysis, and Dr. Rowe, and she realized that there's a difference between a fixated sexual predator or a pedophile or a regressed one. So regressed is that they are not so fixed on having a type of just sleeping with specifically girls or even boys under that, tender ages. So him was done, so he was called an opportunistic pedophile because he was just put in that position. There's an opportunity for him to basically sexually molest a girl, but does not make him one because what he was showing was the signs of that it's not something he will do it again. And after he molested those girls, he actually went and told the mother that this is what he did, and he pleaded guilty upon plea.
Okay.
So imagine from 30 years, he was convicted to 5 years, and he did not need correctional supervision. So he was a very prime candidate to do they call it psychosocial therapy something. And what he was showing that he was a good candidate for that program. But you see again, they were saying, so now that was more of rehabilitation for him than him serving a sentence whereby you're just in a jail cell. But how is he going to be rehabilitated in terms of his condition as an opportunistic pedophile? So those are things in Kenya. Honestly, we don't address them. And that is a very big gap, unfortunately, for the criminal justice system has in terms of attacking, in terms of mental health issues concerning these accused persons. It is not there. We say there's counseling, but it is not actually implemented, unfortunately. And that's one of the biggest issues I also have with our system. It is just not, they're not only even for us prosecutors, but also for these accused people, it is not there at all.
Yeah. So, and that leads nicely to my next question. If anything was possible, and I know you've said resources are thin, and some of these issues come from socioeconomic factors, culture, education. Maybe they don't want they just don't want to go to school. So, what's the best way, if anything was possible, for people to be transformed from a life of crime?
That's a good question. Because that's a good question. I don't know because my last magistrate, second last magistrate, he's a man, and I'll give a case that we did with him. This boy stole from the mom, and it was not the first time; it was the fourth time. So the mom came all three times, crying in court. I pay for this boy's school fees. He was doing something in the TVT, technical vocational training. But he was just not following through. Then again, she's a single mom because their dad died a couple of years ago because she was struggling. She's like, he's the only child who keeps bringing me problems. But again, he's a child that I love a lot. So where I was, mothers are known to really smother their sons to the core. And they really take advantage of that. Also the grandmothers. So as she came to court, she was just crying because the magistrate was like, okay, I understand you have brought your son, but also if I convict him, he'll serve 7 years. He's very young. He was barely 20. He was 21. He's 21. By the time he's leaving jail, it will be 28. How we helped this boy? Basically, you've robbed him, his prime youth. How are we helping this boy? She's like, I am tired. I want to see, we have brought him here so the system can deal with him. And you look at the boy was not remorseful. And he was actually picking his nails like this, saying, yeah, may I stole from my mom. He's like, do you go to school? May I dropped out. So he was asked why. I was just tired. I almost spoke in Kiswahili. I was like, it's
So,
like, what I'm doing is not working for me, the course. So me, I got bored. I want money. The only I can get money quickly is by stealing. And he's like, so is it okay for you to steal from your mother? He's like, me, I want money. So quickest way is to steal from first mom before I steal from other people.
yes.
So now my mom is like, okay, fine. When you start stealing this small, there's a bigger crime, another big offense now called, now there's robbery, then now
Yeah.
there's last night's robbery with violence, but in American, I think in EC they call it robbery with aggravating circumstances, which basically is robbery with violence. I see for Kenya that now if you're convicted, you're actually sentenced to be hanged. But then now, because we don't incorporate the death sentence,
Yeah.
basically life imprisonment, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, so you're still, when you start this small stealing from your mother's handbag, from, her bedside stand, you'll just, once you get yourself into a bad clique of friends, you're going to start now getting armed, get a gun, get a panga, and you go start robbing guys, forcefully. That's already a robbery with violence. That's for you to be convicted for life, or that's we say to be hanged, but that's a heavy sentence. So do you want to rob your mother further away from you? So he was like, you know what, just tell the mother, I don't want to deal with him today, but I need you to also go and relax, cry, but also find it in your heart to forgive him. And for the boy, he was told, for you, you're going to go back to prison and you need to figure out what it is that you want in your life. Write down what it is that you want in your life, and if you and also do a reflection where you are at right now. Are you happy with yourself? If you keep going to go down this path, where do you see yourself going?
Yeah.
Coming back to jail? Do you want that for yourself? Do you want that for your mom? So he went back. After 2 weeks, he was brought back. His attitude still, honestly, it was disgusting,
Yeah.
but he tried a bit better than the first time. And the mom cried. So she's like,
Mm.
okay, I love my son. And
Mm.
asked the boy, your mother is willing to pay for you fees. Actually, even she took another loan so that you could pay fees. Like, she's willing to take a loan to pay for your fees. Are you willing to go back to school? He said, yes. Do you like it being in there? He said, no. I'm like, how is it there? Dealing with now people who have maybe, okay, for murder people, they always put separate, and also people do robbery violence, they always put together those. I'm like, but now you're dealing with rapists, maybe guys who have cut somebody's limb off, which is something was very common in Meru County. So like, are you happy being with such people? There's no privacy. You can catch, this TB or hepatitis outbreaks. Are you happy with your life? He said he's not happy. So for that scenario, they were able to forgive. The boy was not very remorseful, but what we did, we withdrew the case. In the event that he actually does something wrong to the mother again, we will start that case and then also start that other one again.
The next one, yeah.
Yeah, because again, you have to find a way. How did my marriage used to say, bringing somebody to court to jail, how will it resolve your issue? Yes, they wronged you, but you have to look at something 10 years down the line. Has it really helped them? Yeah, we can take them to jail for 2 weeks. They see what it is like over there. Then now for them to sit and think about, okay, I've seen jail, prison, not a good environment. What can I do with my life from there? And that is something the jails or judicial officers always like to promote. Are you happy where you are?
Yeah.
What do you want from your life? Especially these young people, it's really
Yeah.
important. Those are things that we have to always keep doing. So even in such situations where if it's very petty, they plead not guilty, the best thing we always try to do is always try to mediate. Always, 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 always. Because again, you never know. And it's like, especially if it's a neighbor situation,
Yeah.
how are you wronging your neighbor? And tomorrow you're going to need the same neighbor that you've wronged. Those are things we always have to, and also just to tell them like, yeah, the laws are there, but also sometimes take a step back, figure a way out how you guys can also coexist peacefully than always, police come to court, he has to be convicted, he has to serve time, and then what? The issues, and then what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And I love that you mediate and try to look at the bigger picture. You can imprison them, but then yes, in 10 years' time, what has that done for them? So that leads nicely for someone who is starting out on that path of crime, besides the realities you've said of, yeah, you'll get life conviction, you're staying with people who can be very violent, but what else can they understand about the reality of living a life of crime besides what you've said? What are the realities of living such a life based on what you've seen?
I don't know, because honestly, there are those who will understand, but I feel like understanding and seeing is quite subjective.
Different.
What I see and what you see is very different. So there
Yeah.
are those who will understand, that those we call them our customers. You are here. You were here a month ago. Yeah, you were here a
Wow.
month ago. You see the back. It's the life that we know. So some even just be like, it's me, no crime. It's what I know. It's what I'm going to subscribe to. So I also feel, especially for men, unfortunately, which was something we tried to start in my first workstation, but unfortunately we were not able to, was that men who come, let me talk about young men who come from either broken family setups, or maybe their fathers died very early, or even their fathers do not actually take the time to mentor their young ones. They just go the wrong path. Or also what they see their father is doing, it also could be very condescending to not only their mom, but to their sisters and also their aunties. And they see, patriarchism. This is the way, this is what I'm meant to be doing. So again, I feel for especially men, there's no mentorship. So they don't know what is right and what is wrong. So what they do, they feel it's right. Kumbe, this was actually wrong. I didn't know this was actually wrong. Until now, the law has come in to be like, what you did was actually wrong.
Yeah.
So there's a very big gap in terms of mentorship with young men and older men, in terms of telling men, okay, at this age, you're going to expect ABCD. This is how you should go about this thing. This is what is right. This is what is wrong. But it is just not there at all. And unfortunately, even just here in Nairobi, the amount of cases that you see, I'll talk about domestic violence. Maybe you've seen your parents, your father hitting your mom. But also that also comes back to you as the son, you end up hitting your partner.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, as the man, you'll be like, me, I was so angry, I just reacted. Don't justify bad behavior because that's showing that's entitlement. But that it shouldn't have gotten there. That should be like, okay, this is wrong. Do not do this, my son. But it just comes back full circle because there's a huge gap in terms of mentoring men. I know I'm talking about men, but it's true. Mentoring men has a very big gap. Another issue I noticed was now also how men view women. Where I was, there's a lot of misogyny and chauvinism there, which should not be the case. Even I experience a lot of misogyny, and there are days you wake up, you hear yourself speak, and you're like, Ivy, that was actually you talking to somebody older than you, a whole man. You don't feel good about yourself, but again, at the same time, you need somebody to see you in a manner that I am of value. I have worked hard to be where I'm at. My parents did not waste their school fees to put me through law school. And honestly, I deserve some level of respect as a lady. And those are things also just clash a lot, unfortunately. But for men, it is just unfortunate that there's a big gap. And it's always the male offenders that are always being caught. For women, I'll talk about for women now it was always the older women or even younger girls, but it's always now they sell basically traditional alcohol or even women against women fighting because of men. But so that comes from somewhere because for them they feel since there's no male figure, what can I do quickly to make my ends meet to take care of the children basically. Which another thing now for women need to understand is that feminism is there, women empowerment is there, which is something as women, we need to fill that gap at the rural area. Urban, we know feminism and how people go about it is very differently. But also in the rural area, it's not there as it should be. So even women are forced to do pettiest of pettiest crimes just to make the ends meet. So I also feel women empowerment something that needs to be advocated for literally also at the grassroots level.
Okay. So there are so many challenges in your role,
Wow.
from the work itself is challenging, and then you're seeing a system where maybe it's your desire to rehabilitate people in a different way. But I think you mentioned you tried, there was something you guys were trying to do in your previous workstation, but it was just not possible. You're seeing these the gap in mentorship. So how do you navigate through these challenges to keep you going and to keep you sane?